This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Tyler. My guest today is Dr. Uchenna Umeh. Uchenna is originally from Nigeria and she lives in Texas. She's a doctor, a pediatrician, a book author, and a suicide prevention advocate, and a coach. Hi, Uchenna, and welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
I am very excited to hear about you and about your mama and about all the important things you've learned from her. But first, tell me about yourself. Tell me more about your work. I read about you and it all sounds very fascinating.
Okay. I think my most important work is being a mom, as far as I'm concerned, and that's why I go by the nickname Momatrician. I think that's my most important job, is being a mom, and then the second most important job is being a pediatrician. Other than that, I am a big sister to 5 siblings. I have a few goddaughters because I don't have any daughters of my own. I think I have 8 at the last count. And I have 3 sons as far as being a parent is concerned. But also as a pediatrician, I think you end up taking up the persona of a parent to your patients, especially if you're a pediatrician. Ultimately, there'll be some things that they will tell you that they won't tell their parents, and then you have to tell their parents. And then it's a different kind of trust and a different kind of love that a patient, that a child has for their doctor. So I think you can argue that most of my patients are also my children. And then I like to use the word grand doctor for some of my patients who have brought their own kids to see me. So at that point, I'm now the little baby's grand doctor. So I think it's a job, but also it's a way of life for some of us. If you pick pediatrics, you're not picking pediatrics but for the money. You're picking pediatrics for the service, because the babies usually they can't talk. You got to figure it out. They'll poop on you and they'll pee on you, but you're happy to see them and watch them grow and just help raise them, because we are part of the village for the pediatric patients, at least for those of us that are pediatricians. So I think I like that. I love doing that. I think I used to tell people that if you cut my skin, I will bleed a mixture of blood and pediatrics, because of how much I love pediatrics so much. But then you grow up and you grow out. So now I'm still a pediatrician, but I'm doing, less clinical pediatrics. I'm more an activist as opposed to, I like the word activist versus advocate. Mm-hmm. I like activism because I think that's really what I do. I'm an advocate, but more in the activist field. So it's a different energy when you talk about advocacy and activism. You know what I mean? It's a totally different energy. So.
And you wrote 3 books. Will you tell me about the books?
Yes, ma'am. My first book is called How to Raise Well-Rounded Children. That was actually a Facebook Live that I did that got a very good response. People really, resonated with the Facebook Live. So I was like, you know what, maybe I should just convert it into a book. And so I transcribed it while I was in Vietnam last January in 2019. I just had some free time. I went ahead and transcribed it. And I think on the way back on the airplane, I did the edit. And when I got back to the house, I self-published it. And so it took about 10 days to do that. And then the second book was actually originally the first book, but that book is about teen suicide. And at one point, the book got really heavy for me and I couldn't finish writing it. And so when I told my wife what was going on, she said, you're the author of the book, so you could change it. And I was like, no, I don't want to change it. I think one of the kids in the book. So the way the book is designed, it has 3 parts. One part is an overview of suicide in youth. One part is letters from teenagers who are struggling with different stressors. And then the third part is what we can do. But I got stuck in the second part. One of the kids, let me just put it this way, she didn't get to me on time, or I didn't get to her on time in the book. And so that actually affected me so much I couldn't continue writing it. So she was like, no, you can change it. You don't have to write that. But I need people to learn about the fact that kids actually do kill themselves, and it's not a joke. And so what I did was I stopped writing that book and then wrote the first book. I was able to finish the first book, and then that kind of galvanized me to now finish the second book. So now I have 2 books in 10 months. And then this year, I was working on my third book, which is called What If My Child is a Bully? And while I was writing that book, we now had the George Floyd incident. And I usually write 1 blog every month. So for the month of June, my blog was 15 commandments on how to teach your children about racism or something like that. And so that blog went viral.
It reached me as well, yeah.
So I said, oh my God. So somebody, one person, just one individual said, I think this will make a good book. I was like, you know what, you're right. And so what I did was I stopped writing my third book at chapter 8, and then went ahead and wrote I converted the blog into a book. So that book is now 21 Commandments. But that book is just simply called How to Teach Your Children About Racism. And so when I did that, so that book has gotten a lot of, as a matter of fact, yesterday I was in a book club and they were reviewing my book. And I thought that was just so neat that I had a bunch of women who never met me before reviewing my book. And I just thought that was, and they were like, oh my God, we've never met the author of any of the books before. So it was like just a mutual respect and admiration that I had for them to invite me, and then that they had for me to be there, like in living color. So I thought that was neat.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. And so now I'm just going to take my time and finish the book about bullying, because, school, unfortunately, is not back in full swing. So initially that book was supposed to be released in August on time for regular school. But since we now have kind of a mix of hybrid and no school and some school, and I don't know what school is doing, I'm just going to take my time and finish it in time for next, maybe spring or something. I don't know. But I'm taking my time with that. So that's it in essence. But thanks for asking. So yeah, go check out the books. They're on Amazon.
Uchenna, I would love to learn a little more about Nigeria and about how you came here and when. I just found out that Nigeria is a very big country. It is 200 million people.
Yeah, it has a little bit more than that, but I don't know. For some reason, it's been 200 million forever. But I think we're probably about the size of, geographically in size, we're probably about the size of Texas, I think. And we are a densely populated country made up of 3 major tribes: the Hausas, the Igbos, and the Yorubas. Sadly, the white man, the colonizer, came and took it upon himself to divide, or rather to merge 3 different groups of people into one. And that may be the error of the century, or the of life, because we're 3 different people, 3 different food, 3 different cultures. And
languages.
Sadly, we're forced to.
Uchenna, what's with languages? Are the languages the same, or are they different?
No, that's why I said the Igbos, the Hausas, and the Yorubas. Those are the 3 languages. They're the 3 major.
We languages. I thought, okay, so each tribe has its own language.
Tribes are languages. It's a tribe is a language in most people's senses. In America, I think tribe is like a social media thing, but that's not real. The tribe is actually, a group of people who speak the same language, have the same custom, have the same culture. So there are 3 major ones in Nigeria, but there are at least 100 or 200 others that are smaller tribes. And that's the problem that we're having now. We're having a lot of tribal issues and religious issues. And, in the last several weeks, we've had, a lot of the worst case of military rule, using military weapons on armed civilians, and just all of this. You can almost draw tribal lines. At the end of the day, there's always some kind of tribal thing going on.
What is the dominating religion, Uchenna?
It depends on where you are. If you're in the East, which is where I'm from, we're predominantly Christians. If you go to the West, it's a mix of Christians and Muslims. And if you go to the North, they are predominantly Muslims. But that doesn't mean that in the North, you don't get some Christians. And in the, you still get some, but that's kind of where it goes. And then sadly, the religion causes a lot of clash. It's not ideal right now, but it's all we've got. And so we're trying to stay united. And it's very painful when you see these things that are happening literally across tribal lines. It's almost like America, because I like to make it easy for people to picture it. If you come to America, you see how in today's world, the white people separate themselves from the blacks, who separate themselves from the Asians, who separate themselves from the Indians. Yes, it's called United States of America, but the truth is the Indians don't want to be black. The blacks don't want to be white. The whites don't want to be Asians. I mean, we are who we are. And it's not always healthy to force everyone to be the same because we're uniquely made to be different. There are things to celebrate in uniting. But I think you don't want to lose your individuality, which is what happens when you try to force everyone to be the same. Even in Christians, there are the apostolic Christians, there are the Jehovah's Witnesses, there are the Catholics. So I think we have to respect the differences. Even on your own fingers, there are 5 different fingers. There's a pinky finger and a thumb and a middle finger and a ring finger and a pointy finger, because we're supposed to be different. But then we can also fight for the same cause, which is why all those fingers make one hand. But ideally, you shouldn't give the thumb the little finger's job, because it's not, it's not made to be the little finger.
If we learn that, it would make our lives much better and easier to respect each other, but while respecting each other's differences, as you say.
Yeah.
So when did you come to United States? How did you leave Nigeria?
I think it was either November or December of 1994 is when I came. I came here before that for a visit, just to visit my friends. And I can't remember when that was. And I fell in love with the medical system as far as residency program is only 3 years. I fell in love with that because in Nigeria, under the British system, residency can be 7 or 8 years or longer if you don't pass your exams. You can just remain in limbo.
Oh, you were already a doctor?
Yeah, I did medical school in Nigeria. Yeah, I left medical school. I finished medical school in 91. So I'll be 30 years old as a doctor next year. So I did my housemanship in Nigeria and then a mandatory youth service corps, which is something that all the youth after graduating from college have to do. It's like a semi-military training-ish. And you work, in a particular part of the country to try to get people exposed to different parts of the country. You wear a uniform. And it's a fun 1-year sabbatical for some. And then after that, I was done. And then I got a couple of jobs here and there. But I knew I wanted to come to America for my residency. So I started taking my exams, the licensing exams, to be able to come to do residency. So you take those exams in Ghana. And so we did that, and then we came. So I came in 94, and I started my residency in 95. So I just came here to do my residency, and then after that, I stayed. I went to Howard University Hospital.
Let's jump to your mama. Can you tell me more about your mama? What is her name? How do you spell her name?
Her name is Ngozi. That's her first name, which means blessing.
Beautiful.
She's the first of between 11 and 13 kids. I don't remember. I lost count. Either 12 or 13 kids. Back home, back then, the Nigerian men, most of the men could have more than one wife. So she's the first child of the first wife. And then there's a second wife who had her own children as well. So she's the first of overall. And she grew up in the times when Nigeria was good, when Nigeria didn't have, that was before the Civil War, when, according to the stories, people had, anything that they wanted, and education was free and life was good. So she grew up as a first child and went to school and got married and had me first.
What did she go to school for? Did she go to university or?
Yeah, she's a graduate. She has an accounting degree. She's an accountant. She's a retired accountant. She's a retired bank manager.
Okay.
She's an accountant. Actually, we both went to the same alma mater. And my dad was already in the Air Force. She had already had me and my brother and my sister. And then she went to college for 4 years and then had the last 3 after her college degree. So there's about a 4, maybe 4.5 year difference between the first 3 and the last 3 because of that break to go to university. And I just ended up going to the same university as she did.
And she managed to work with 6 children at home?
I don't know that it's a manage. I mean, in Nigeria, you work if you want to work, or you stay home if you don't want to work. She was educated and she wanted to work, so she did. Nigeria, we don't have. Nigeria is not America where the mother has to take care of all the kids by themselves. We have nannies. We don't call them nannies. We call them uncles and aunties, but we have house helps. It's very cheap labor. So, you have house helps. Everybody I know has house helps and at least 2 or 3 house helps. So I don't know that it was a burden per se to have. It's not like me who I'm in a country where labor is expensive and you can't trust people and you don't know what you're getting kind of thing. Nigeria is not like that.
And you have to drive your kids from left to right. Moms are kind of imprisoned in this country with just driving the kids from school to, I don't know, basketball practices to left and right. It takes a lot of time.
It takes a toll. What I did for that, though, was I made sure that the boys had either similar extracurriculars. That was the first rule. And then, because my baby is about 6 years younger than the eldest, once the eldest got old enough, he could drive his brother to school or help out with driving his brother to school or something like that. And then we had a nanny a little bit after my divorce from their dad, we had a nanny for maybe a couple of years. And then the oldest one got old enough. And then I think their uncle also came with a green card and stayed with us for a little bit until we moved here. So it wasn't too bad for me. The school was in the neighborhood. They had a school bus, so the school bus would pick them up and bring them home. So I didn't have to do that. It was also a conscious decision that I made to not have to do that, partially because I also had my own practice. So I didn't have the time to do that. But then I just didn't want that. I've seen people who do that, and I don't like the way they look. You should not be looking like, you're run over by a truck because you're trying to be a mom. And if your child doesn't want to do ballet, you don't have to sign them up with ballet. If they don't want to do Kumon, you don't have to sign them up for Kumon. But I see people doing that. They feel like it's a rite of passage, for your child to have all these extracurricular activities and not enough time to be a child. Yeah. And I wasn't about that. So we didn't do that. My kids didn't do that. Once they don't want to do it, we stop doing that. That's my rule. My rule is you have one extracurricular and that's it. And if you don't like it anymore, you don't have to do it.
Let's talk about Mama Ngozi. Did I pronounce that okay?
Yeah, it's good enough.
About her lessons, about what do you feel like you learned from her?
I think one of the lessons that one of the maybe unintended lessons was just to try to be there for my kids 24/7 as much as I could, because she was a working class citizen and she just wasn't there. She wasn't home. And I was kind of raised by my aunts and my uncles and the house helps, which is pretty common in Nigeria. But I made sure that I was available for the kids as much as I could. So we started by just limiting the extracurriculars and making sure that on the weekends we went somewhere where they wanted to go, or we took a trip together, or I wanted to create memories that included me in their lives. So that was an unintentional lesson. And I love that, because after the divorce, it was just me and my boys, and we toured the country every weekend. We just made memories for them so that they would grow up and hopefully pick some of those memories, for their own children. So that was probably something that she didn't go out of her way to teach me that, but I certainly learned that because she was working all the time. And then and then I went to boarding school. So then I was not even home at all. Mm-hmm. And then when I was home, she wasn't home. So it was hard to just say, oh, yeah, she taught me this. I learned how to cook from my aunties, how to braid hair from my aunties. So it wasn't really there. She wasn't really present in my life. And then when I finished high school, I went in straight to medical school. When I finished medical school, I came straight to America. So It was only after I started having children that we now started mending our relationship. And then she was able to come and stay with me and help me with the kids as much as she could. So for a long time during my formative years, she wasn't there. And that's my truth. So, and it's common in Nigeria. A lot of the kids go to boarding school. It's very, very common. And then you're home for the holidays. But we have a country where parents don't really hang out with their kids like that. So again, another unintentional lesson. I made sure that I'm able to hang out with my kids. And, we have Friday night game night and Friday night events. And on the weekends, where do you want to go? And then we go somewhere and we do stuff together. I remember a couple of Christmases ago, just in that same spirit of doing stuff together, the boys were home from college, the elder boys were home from college. And I was like, we're going to go downtown and we're going to create memories for Christmas this Christmas. And they were like, oh, Mom, we don't want to go. And, we ended up going downtown and we were just walking downtown San Antonio and we get to this light. And this lady walks up to us. She's like, you look like a family. Are you from out of town? We're like, no, we live here. She's like, oh, would you mind me interviewing you? We're looking for families who have kids in college and we want to interview them and how the family dynamics are with the kids in college. And to this day, they still talk about that because they were on TV. And the funny thing about it is they would have stayed home and just maybe played their video games. But I said, no, we need to go downtown and create memories. And so it turned out that was one of the best Christmases ever because they got to be interviewed and they were on TV and they got to talk about life in college and at home and things like that. I didn't have that growing up. Mm-hmm. But of course, also, it was by design. It's just the Nigerian way. You have house helps and they pretty much raise the kids. So, but once I got older and I started having children and she came to help with the kids, we started bonding as two adults and two equals because we're now both parents. Then I kind of learned other things about maybe patience with the kids. And I was like, well, you didn't do that with me. She's like, well, that's kind of, what you do, you should be patient with them and things like that. But when I was growing up, I didn't experience that. So I'm happy for the kids that they have their grandmother to go to and say, oh, Mom didn't do this or Mom did that. And then she comes and says, okay, they need this or they need that. I'm like, oh, God. And then I let them have it because their grandmother asked for it. So there's that respect and that reverence for your parent that I still have because I was raised to have reverence for my parents. And so now the other day she told me that the eldest son calls them every Sunday. They have their, she's in Nigeria. My dad is in Nigeria, but he calls from Boston in graduate school. But every weekend they have their conversation. And I love that. I love that. And I'm very happy that that's happening. And I had nothing to do with it. It was just something that I guess they started it once and they liked it and they just continued. And I like it. I'm happy.
So I guess the next lesson connects very beautifully to this, which is learning to understand your own kids and to treat each child as an individual.
I think that's one of the things that most parents maybe accidentally don't remember, that each child is different. And as a pediatrician, I know I've seen where parents compare children, which I probably am guilty of. I think all parents are guilty of that in a sense. So you compare, oh, but he never did that, or he talked faster, or he loved cars, or he doesn't love cars, or but when your brother was like that, he didn't do that. So we kind of inadvertently compare children to each other But now that I've seen, each one of them is an individual, and each one of them is beautiful and has what they have to offer, and what they bring to the table is different and is beautiful and is unique. So I urge the parents out there to just remember that. Now I'm seeing my mother is treating each of us children differently and uniquely. But, it wasn't always like that. At the beginning, it was like, all of you kids are all, all. But we're 6 different individuals, and we're not the same. Each one of us is just beautiful and wonderfully made, and we have to respect the fact that we are different. So I know that my mom definitely, she nudged me in that direction to just kind of see that each child is different. And, so this child is not going to be like his brother. And just learn that and just accept that and just go with that. And so I'm learning to allow that with the kids, allow each one of them to be different from the other, and that's okay.
And then we have the last, but not the least, or even maybe the most important one, about your voice.
Well, generally, because I'm a speaker, my mom, I think we're all activists in my home. When we had the demonstrations the last several weeks in Nigeria, my siblings that are in Nigeria were there, because that's just kind of how we were raised, to speak up and speak out for those who don't have a voice or who may not speak. And so my mom always said that, it's only a dead man that is quiet, or a dead man that has no say. And so while you're alive, you should make your voice count. And I like to quote John Lewis, rest in peace, who talked about just getting into good trouble, as long as it's something that you can stand your foot and say, you know what, I did this and I'm proud that I did it. It's good trouble, then do it. And so I like that. I quote my mom a lot because of that. I quote her a lot. I say that a lot. Only a dead man is perfectly quiet. And so we should not hush children. Growing up is one of the things that, parents in Nigeria do. They hush the kids, or don't say that, or be quiet, or, things like that.
But also very important for women across the world, because being in the West, we tend to forget how majority of women in the world still don't have a voice or the right to their own voice, which is important to remember.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. I think women generally have always been, I don't know where the idea came that we are the weaker sex, weaker in the sense that, I think maybe they meant weaker with maybe strength. But the other day we were watching I forget the show on TV, I forget the name right now, where some exercise fitness people go and do all kinds of obstacle courses, and an American Ninja, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. And there were women there and there are men there, equally, doing the exact same obstacles. You can build up your power and build up your strength to that. You can definitely do that. So women are definitely as strong, if not stronger, than men. Emotionally, we are, for sure. We have to remember that and not allow our voices to be swallowed or to be hushed or to be quiet for whatever reason.
Wow, these were beautiful and important. Do we have any more, or are we done with Mama Ngozi's lessons?
I think the lessons are just continuous. I think one just has to accept where they are. For me now, I see that I am getting older, and when you're younger, you always tell yourself, you don't ever want to grow up to be like your mother, and then you end up growing up and you are your mother. And so
yes,
it's one of those things everybody has to just end up. But I thank God for that. I know when I was younger, I don't think I was a rebel per se, but I know sometimes she was like, you're gonna have a daughter that's gonna do the same thing to you, but I don't have a daughter, so I'm happy about that. But generally speaking, it's just good for someone to just be true to yourself, and I think that's it. That's it. Just be true to yourself and know that everyone is different and everyone has something to offer. Everyone has something to bring to the table, and respect everyone, respect humans. If we had enough respect for each other, there wouldn't be, stuff like racism. You wouldn't have that because everybody would respect everybody else. But we have stuff like racism because we're not, sadly. But yeah, so I think it's an ongoing. I don't think we're done with each other. It's an ongoing thing. My mother and I were just at a much better place, and I'm just so thankful for her presence in the kids' lives as their grandmother, and they have her. She comes here often. Also, of course, she hasn't been able to come this year because of the COVID.
Yeah.
But she generally comes to visit, and I'm thankful about that. And the kids have their grandmother, which is a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Beautiful. Let's just quickly, before we end, let's quickly recap what we've heard. I have Be There for Your Kids. I have Learning to Understand Your Kids and Treating each child as his own individual. I have Using Your Voice because, as we learned, only a dead man is quiet. I also, last time we spoke, I have a little note that I like to mention here, which I thought is important. Talk about what other people don't dare to talk about. And then I have Respect differences. I wrote down respect for your parents.
Respect for your parents, that's a Nigerian thing.
Yeah.
That's a big, huge Nigerian thing. It's huge in Nigeria. It's not so common here, but it's definitely a big deal in Nigeria.
I think it's important. I'm trying to teach my son that, gently, of course. I wrote down getting in good trouble. I think that was connected to using your voice.
Yes.
And what you just mentioned, accept where you are, be true to yourself, that everybody has something to offer, and thus you should respect others. Thank you. These are beautiful, beautiful lessons. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Congratulations on your podcast and all the awards you've won. So just keep up the good work.
Thank you. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider. That's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.